in 5, 4, 3. Just give me a second. It's taking a little bit longer. Okay, we're live.
Good morning, everybody, to this international webinar on life skills measurement. This is a very proud day for UNICEF and all our partners who've been working passionately, relentlessly, and sensitively in the area of life skills for past 3 years or more. And we have reached this moment when we can proudly share all our work with a larger audience and for the benefit of all the girls and boys in our country. We call this webinar as international, bringing in global thinkers and practitioners who've created immense wealth of knowledge and material in this domain and are leading intellectuals who will benefit to start a serious discourse in the upcoming area of life skills measurement, especially for our country, India. They have pearls of wisdom for us and wealth to distribute, and I urge each one of us to hear them carefully, learn and decide the course of action that India will need to take forward in the area of measurement of life skills. I thank all of you who are joining us today from far and near, Australia, Cape Town, Nepal, New York, and from all over India. In fact, this webinar has broken all boundaries and brought all of us together. I begin this session by welcoming Terry Durnian, Chief Education, UNICEF India. Terry, in fact, is an exemplar of a person rising from grassroots as a teacher and continuing to serve the field of education for over 28 years and still getting stronger. He's brought in rich experience from various parts of his work. He leads UNICEF's current work on education, working to ensure children across the country have the right to a quality education, starting from early learning. As I said, he's an educationist with over 28 years of experience. He started his career actually as a secondary school teacher in Northern Canada. He moved overseas in the mid-90s and has been serving in various managerial and programmatic roles at UNICEF, Save the Children, CARE, World Bank, and voluntary services overseas in Nigeria, even the state of Palestine, Thailand, Bangladesh, Cambodia, extremely rich wealth of experience. Terry is from Nova Scotia, Canada, and is now residing with us in India, working with us in this sector. Welcome, Terry, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Suman. I'm very excited and pleased to be here today with you, everyone. India, with its population of more than 253 million adolescents, there's a huge potential for India to benefit from a demographic dividend, which, if nurtured well, could result in stronger growth. However, low literacy rates, poor acquisition of life skills severely limits their prospects. Young people, especially girls in India, do not have the knowledge and skills for self-development and to transition effectively from school to work. Across India's estimated 1.5 million schools, few students are gaining the basic skills needed to enter the workforce and attain the future success in life. Furthermore, in the last few decades, job skills demanded by the private sector have undergone a change, with psycho-emotional skills emerging as an important factor for the sector. In the context, today's webinar aims to understand why life skills and their measurement are important globally and in India in the context of education, as well as in relation to the future of work. The webinar will focus on the importance of measurement within life skills programs being implemented across India and globally, and highlight the need for measurement to establish corresponding impacts on adolescents' learning. We have convened stakeholders who support and engage on life skills globally and in India, including those from academia, government, civil society organizations, and the private sector. A warm welcome to all the speakers and panelists today. I'm very pleased to have Mr. Manoj Ahija, Chairman of CBSE, the Director of NCRT, Professor Esther Kerr from Melbourne University, Professor Andrew Dawes from University of Oxford, Dr. Renu Singh from Young Lives India, and Alexandra van der Plong, the Global Head of CSR SAP. The Comprehensive Life Skills Framework developed by UNICEF India with its partners states that investing in the development of life skills amongst adolescents aged 10 to 19 years could break entrenched cycles of poverty and inequalities. Life skills enables young people, especially girls and the most marginalized, to have greater control over their life choices. Building life skills improves educational attainment and has demonstrated strong correlations with personal satisfaction and growth, as well as reducing risky behavior such as drug use. Furthermore, recognizing the strong determining role of life skills on an individual's capacity to lead an active and productive life in society, UNICEF India is leveraging efforts and resources on building and strengthening life skills in children and adolescents, working closely with government and partners. Despite the strong emphasis and concerted efforts on life skills development across the country, there are limited, valid, and reliable life assessment tools for comprehensive and systematic life skills measurement. A major challenge to the measurement of life skills emerges from the variability in intended outcomes, the lack of consensus of defining skills, and the lack of measurement methods available, specifically in the context of India. Thus, there's a clear need to create life skills measurement tool, which would enable government and civil society organizations to measure impact of life skills interventions on adolescents' learning and the future outcomes. Through a mapping exercise, UNICEF identified the need for age-specific, context-friendly life skills measurement for adolescents in India. Most existing life skills measurement tools are based on self-reporting, treating adolescents as a homogeneous population without the consideration of age group, urban-rural differences, in-school, out-of-school context, and language differences, as well as social economic factors. As such, a key challenge in tool development was for the tool to be valid across different contexts so that the validity of the tool and its capacity to measure life skills domains remains consistent despite slight variations in the different life skills modules being implemented by different states across the country. Furthermore, the measurement tool and its administration were designed so that it could be implemented by departments of education with minimum effort. UNICEF collaborated with Young Lives India to design a tool to measure the prevalence and patterns of life skills in 11 to 14-year-old adolescents. The tool is available in Hindi and Assamese currently. With careful planning and sustained efforts, UNICEF India and its partners have developed a constructive, validated life skills measurement tool for elementary stage adolescents. The tool has been informed by the Comprehensive Life Skills Framework developed by UNICEF and its partners in 2018. And the measurement tool was piloted in 6 states. A technical manual has been also prepared to guide users in the use of the assessment tool. And it has also been digitalized and made available to teachers and learners across the country in the form of an online self-administered life skills measurement tool. Today, we hope you take the discussion on life skills measurement forward through this webinar and share through the sharing of global, regional, and national understanding policies, efforts on life skill measurement of children to really take this issue forward in India to improve how we measure and empower adolescents for their current and future development. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to you, Suman. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you so much. I'm going to be introducing a woman who's been breaking the glass ceiling. She's a role model for a number of young girls in our country and outside our country. She's worked in emergency situations, health, in fact, most difficult situations and countries, and has emerged as a very strong and competent leader. Dr. Yasmin Ali Haq is our UNICEF India representative to India since July 2017. With over 24 years of service in UNICEF, she started her career in Bangladesh. She has held leadership roles in the Office of Emergency Programs, South Sudan, Ghana, and Sri Lanka, and she brings wealth of experience to our land here. Dr. Haq's leadership and professional experience spans over a wide range of fields, including policy analysis, strategic planning for women and child rights, child-centered development programming, and large-scale responses for children in humanitarian crisis. She's a strong believer in the power of partnerships in accelerating results for our children. Over to you, Dr. Yasmin.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon to colleagues everywhere. It's a great privilege to be here, and especially to be joined by a distinguished panel, chairman of CBSE, from colleagues from NCRT, Young Lives Renu, who's a constant champion for children, Jim from our regional office, Esther from the academia. Really, it's a privilege to have you with us today. I think Terry's really set the scene so well as to, why it is important that we have this life skills education in India, but also not just have a curriculum and a plan for rolling it out, but really looking at what is it going to lead towards. Whenever I've been, which was for nearly a year, I haven't been able to go out and interact with young people. And I guess that's the challenge we all face nowadays. When I've talked to young girls who have broken barriers, who have broken ceilings, who have fought to stay in school, to complete their schooling, to go on to a degree, the one thing that they say, now what? How are we going to move beyond this? What about a job? What about employment? What about being financially self-sustaining? And I think that's the question that keeps driving a lot of what we're doing nowadays. And life skills is crucial if we are to see young people developing their agency, striving to go beyond what is traditionally available to them. And for that reason, it's so important that UNICEF, government, our NGO partners, private sector, we all come together really to look at what are the options and to fill in the gaps where we do see gaps. And of course, life skills and has come up as a key area where we all need to be working to support young people in becoming more skilled and more competent. One such initiative that UNICEF has been nurturing along with other partners is called YUVA. It's part of the UNICEF global initiative called Generation Unlimited. And it's really about how do we engage young people as change leaders? How do we equip them with the skills they need for future, including the 21st century skills? And also, how do we help create pathways to jobs and entrepreneurship? We have worked together, UNICEF as a part of UA and other UN agencies, government departments, private sector entities, and of course, civil society organization um, to really listen to young people. What is it that, what are their hopes and aspirations? What are the bottlenecks they are facing? And how do we really engage with them in a meaningful manner, amplify their aspirations, choices, and really address those unmet needs that they have? Now, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic threw a spanner in the works for all our plans and aspirations. And what we have tried to do through UA is really continue listening to young people, because we have seen job losses across industries. We've seen educational institutions that have not reopened fully. I think one of the highlights that of my week last week was as I came to the office in the morning, I saw kids going to school. Albeit they're the senior class kids, but for the first time in nearly a year, I saw children walking to school, and this is in an urban metropolitan area. Think about the rural areas where so many young people are still not able to get to that level. So it's really important that we take this to heart and look at how do we systematically try to address the needs that young people are facing. It means, of course, that we look at the great opportunities that we have. And I think the National Education Policy 2020, which the government launched in July, is an important milestone for all of us because it places the emphasis on enabling young people to develop life skills such as communication, resilience, creativity, and most importantly, critical thinking. And it's all to foster a logical thinking, decision making, and opening the doors for them to think innovatively. It also provides an opportunity for UNICEF, UA, and all our partners to reach out to a much larger cohort of young people, both within the education system and those who are not in the education system. So, in response to the pandemic, business leaders, civil society agencies, and academicians are recognizing the need more and more to see how can we support young people cope early and to cope with setbacks and hone their adaptability life skills. Over the last 3 decades, the focus of education is shifting from acquisition of literacy skills to their practical use in real life situations. If we look at ILO's employability framework, the World Economic Forum's framework on global life skills, and OECD's tool for social and emotional learning, some of these reports really highlight nowadays the role that skills like resilience and critical thinking and creativity play is getting a stronger place and really adding to the academic scores of young people. It also then is leading to improving the occupational status and, of course, the income that goes with that. So while the work on life skills continues, another big dialogue that remains true is the measurement of these life skills. Globally, UNICEF has worked on some initiatives for it, and also in India, together with partners like SAP, we have been focusing on a collaboration along with MSDF and CIF to run a 3-year initiative to create localized and test measurement model for life skills. So today we really take pride in presenting UNICEF India's work in life skills and skills measurement. And that's what today's webinar is about. So thanks to all of you who have been collaborating with us, complementing each other's work. And really, I think we have today on a panel a group of people who are focused on supporting young people acquire the skills and keep them ready for the future and resilient for today and tomorrow. So I really welcome you all here, and I thank you for recognizing the importance of life skills because this is a crucial indicator of children's learning and how we can work to make these tools accessible to all is a shared vision that we have and a shared passion. So welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today. Back to you, Suman.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you for a very, very warm welcome and excellent opening to the webinar by bringing in notice to our work as well as that of our partners. I now bring you to Dr. Jim Eckers. He's the Regional Education Advisor in ROSA UNICEF office. He actually brings in immense experience and has an illustrious career and is kind of a lighthouse for our region, bringing in scholarships in the field of education, which has been especially relevant during the pandemic. It's guided us all in terms of how to continue learning, how to apply inclusion lens to our work, gender, social, disability lens. And above all, he's leading a great big family of ours as a regional education head, making all its members pull together in the same direction. Jim worked at the University of London Institute of Education as an education advisor for the UK government in Senegal and Kenya before joining UNICEF in 2003, way back. He was regional education advisor at the UNICEF Eastern and Southern Africa office in 2009 and in East Asia and the Pacific in April 2014. So years and years of experience he's bringing in. He's published widely in international education in areas including teacher education and pedagogical practices and exclusion from education. Jim is a true fighter for the cause of children, actively been involved in out-of-school children. And this is an area where the issue of child labor and access to educationally explicitly connect. Another important work that he has been leading and supporting Southeast Asia is the primary learning process, which involves assessing competencies, including foundational competencies that should link to employability. And that's what he's able to bring into our webinar today. He's co-chair for technical working groups on education, 2030 plus it's called, for the Asia and Pacific region with UNESCO. So I welcome Jim, and over to you to speak to our audience.
Thank you, Suman. That's very kind of you, very kind introduction. If you don't mind, colleagues, if I can just say distinguished colleagues rather than going through people's names and people's functions, if that's okay. When I was in Nigeria, we were allowed to say all rights of protocol duly observed, and then you could proceed. So I do appreciate you, but I'll go straight into the discussion. What I'm going to do in my little presentation is look at some of the sort of historical evolution of life skills and how UNICEF has interacted with it in the past, and then look at some of the critical issues that have always been there and perhaps some of the critical issues which are now emerging in relation to life skills. Firstly, to state that life skills are at the core of the 2019 to 2030 Global Education Strategy, which supports the development of the breadth of skills that allow young people to become agile, adaptive learners and citizens equipped to navigate personal, social, academic, economic, and environmental challenges. So that's really our kind of central position on life skills within the overall learning agenda. I think most recently, UNICEF's Middle East and North Africa region has led the way on life skills. And I'm delighted that UNICEF, the government of India, and UAR are now forging the way ahead in South Asia. UNICEF has always been a great advocate of life skills, but in the past, the focus, certainly from the 1980s to towards the the end of the previous millennium, the focus was often on the scourge of HIV/AIDS, and so the focus was on life skill programs that allowed adolescents to remain safe from infection and also support those who were infected and affected. I think this aspect of life skills still remains, is still an important consideration. HIV/AIDS is still on the global agenda. but also within the broader scope of sexual and reproductive health. I think you'd expect to see attention given to that within life skills. The Arab Spring, which started around 2011, was in part fueled by a disaffected, burgeoning youth population in a region where civil and political participation was a real challenge, and decent employment opportunities were scarce. It's not surprising, therefore, that the UNICEF Middle East and North Africa Office responded with the Life Skills and Citizenship Education Initiative in 2015, which is now well documented. Parallel to the development of the new education strategy, we also saw the inception of Generation Unlimited, and that's why it's so good to see you on the platform today. This is a new platform that pulled together the different sectors and actors working around skills, including employability skills. As has already been said, the enhanced focus on adolescence is extremely relevant to South Asia, as 48% of the region's population is below the age of 25, thus making it home to the largest share of the world's youth population. I think we'd all agree that young people, if trained adequately and appropriately, can drive economies and societies to be more productive and cohesive. There is huge potential to use a demographic dividend to drive growth in South Asia. However, a 2018 report from the ILO noted that India's existing labor force and demographic dividend is woefully underprepared and underskilled for work within the fourth industrial revolution landscape. So I think the development of this life skills framework is very timely. Aside from challenges around employability, many young children have to cope with poor nutrition, sanitation and health, and various forms of risk, including the realities and risk of climate change and conflict in some areas. They therefore also need the broad social and emotional skills to survive and thrive in these environments, and what we now often refer to as the 21st century skills. It's good to see this captured under resilience and learning in your life skills framework. The need for life skills education is highlighted in the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and it's very encouraging to see that it's also very much the focus of India's National Education Policy 2020. I found this quite an inspirational document. The focus on the holistic development of learners and moving away from the culture of rote learning to experiential and more collaborative learning is particularly
We seem to have lost Jim.
Yes.
Yes, looks like. Okay. Looks like Jim is having some connection problem. I think we'll try and get him back. Meanwhile, I think let's move on to our next speaker here.
He seems to be back.
Oh, is he? Okay. Jim, are you there?
I do apologize. I'm back again. I just
Okay,
had a cut there.
Great.
Yeah. Can you hear me now, Suman?
Please continue.
Okay,
Please continue.
great. You know, I was saying that in some countries, there's been a move back away from the competency-based approaches to education, more to the recall of factual content in terms of assessment. I think this is very, very regrettable. If assessment focuses on content rather than skills, schools and teachers will be encouraged to sacrifice more holistic approaches to learning. I hope this will not be the case in India. A historic battle around life skills has always been whether they should be mainstreamed across the curriculum or taught as a separate subject. I would argue that they must always be mainstreamed. No national curriculum can be complete unless it addresses the full range of life skills. The 4 dimensions of learning which structure the approach in India are also the same dimensions that structure the approach in Middle East and North Africa. These are, of course, learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and the most problematic, I think, is the fourth, learning to live together. This is the most contested of these dimensions when it comes to curriculum and assessment. As I learned when I was working on the regional assessment project with the ASEAN countries. Indeed, teaching citizenship and global citizenship can have very different meanings, and the two can often be in tension. So I think that will be an interesting thing to look at in your approach in India. Rosa's position on learning life skills and life skills measurement is what I'd quickly like to touch on now. Rosa is committed to working with governments and partners across the region on areas like policy development, curriculum reform, and teacher education, depending on the country's priority. And research that we commissioned over the last couple of years before COVID suggested that the most critical change required in most countries in the region was the shift away from teacher-centered pedagogy to a more differentiated approach. This is sometimes referred to as teaching at the right level in India, for example, as coined by Prathan. And it was good to see that this approach has also been adopted in Sri Lanka, and I was part of the evaluation of the approach recently, and we saw some great progress being made around individualized approaches to learning and formative assessment in Sri Lanka. Rosa is also very committed to supporting assessment capacity across South Asia. This work is led by my colleague Frank Van Kapel, who I'm sure is on the call today. And the focus is essential because few countries in the region engage with international assessments, and currently there is no regional assessment, and finally because there is weak interest in or capacity for formative assessment in many countries. We hope that the new assessment platform, which we have established at UNICEF Rosa, will be widely used by ministries in the region. One of the key features of this platform is an online assessment self-evaluation tool that can be done independently by individuals or organizations. It aims to support cross-national collaboration and capacity building across South Asia. We would welcome the participation of some of the officials from the meeting today in the official launch, which will come up shortly. While we were rolling out the global education strategy from late 2019, GenU also started to build momentum. A key moment was the Youth Skills Forum in Mumbai, where several reports around skills and employability were shared. This agenda has rapidly gained pace. 6 of the 8 countries in the region now have a GenU mechanism, and Rosa now has a skills and employability and GenU focal point, John True. Elsewhere across South Asia, there's also considerable interest from governments to radically transform their education systems now as they plan to build back better. The name Reimagine Education occurs within UNICEF's core messaging at the global level, is also found in the National Educational Policy of India 2020. This radical shift in focus has been accelerated by the COVID response and the unleashing of new creative approaches to ensure continuity of learning post-COVID. Education decision makers and practitioners need to be able to establish systems to measure and track progress on life skills across different populations so that they can identify the progress of policies and programs and adjust. I very much welcome the flexible approach to assessing life skills, which is being pioneered in India. This will ensure relevance. One of the key challenges of life skills measurement will be selecting the right approach to measuring the different types of skills and competencies. Oral communication skills may be just as important as written communication skills, but they are more difficult to assess. In the 2019 UNICEF World Bank publication, Measuring Life Skills in the Context of Life Skills and Citizenship Education in the Middle East and North Africa, reviews available instruments for measuring life skills and reflects on how life skills can be effectively taught. Much will depend on the context, both at the country level and within the country. What is ultimately most important is the capacity of a teacher or instructor to teach life skills and use formative assessment to respond to individual learner needs. Formative assessments can, of course, include observation and peer assessment. It's not just testing. More recently, there have been automated approaches to assessment that are also being pioneered by UNICEF in places such as Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh through a mechanism known as Tangerine. As we try to recover from the huge learning loss due to COVID, it will be critically important that schools adapt their curricula so they are more manageable and that they carry out formative assessment, and finally that they allow for differentiated approaches to pedagogy depending on the student's level, and also that they should address the full range of life skills across different age groups. I think there's a significant risk now that we may see a reduction in curriculum just focusing on literacy and numeracy, and I think that is something to be avoided, although it is also critical. So in conclusion, I applaud India on the bold new approach it has taken to ensure a holistic education for its children and adolescents. Also, its commitment to life skills, which is part of this approach. This is a key step forward for India and for our overall global approach towards ensuring that life skills are a critical part of every curriculum. I very much look forward to learning more about the approach today. Finally, I would also like to wish you success in the test match against India, but this will be pushing my global citizenship values to a new level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you very much, and for your best wishes for our cricket team back home. I now take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Manoj Ahuja, who's Chairman, CBSE, Central Board for Secondary Education in India. I would rather relate his name with three P's, meaning one of the most proactive, progressive, and a pragmatic IS officer I've come across. What I'm saying is not without a reason. I have an example to prove. He recently saw our career guidance portal in one of the states, in fact, his home, his Kharda state, and he wanted to bring this for all children as part of CBSE. Not only he was very proactive in reaching whoever, moving all boundaries, removing all red tapeism, but very decision-making and pragmatic and thinking that it is going to really move forward the agenda for children in our country. So welcome, Mr. Manoj Ahuja. He's an IS officer of 1990 batch from Odisha Kharda, holding a BTech Mechanical Engineering degree from Thapar Institute of Engineering and Technology, Patiala. But also he's an MBA from Punjab University, Chandigarh, and Masters in Public Administration, International Development from Harvard University, USA. So a mixed bag of degrees and experience he brings in. He joined as chairman, CBSE, prior to the Secretary of Education who exists at this point of time. He took the charge from her, came early last year, 2020, during the pandemic, and has been really breaking barriers and increasing efficiency in the system. Prior to joining as a chairman, CBSE, Mr. Ahuja worked as special director of Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration, LBSNA as we call them, and many of us have been trained over there. He worked in various capacities in his cadre in departments of agriculture, Department of Steel and Mines, Food and Civil Supplies Department. And now here he is with education, bringing in his hobbies of reading, sports, and education for all children. Welcome, Mr. Manoj Ahuja. Over to you.
Thank you, Suman. And let me also welcome all the distinguished panelists and other people who are listening onto this conference. At the onset, I must compliment UNICEF for organizing this international workshop. It's a very topical subject, and the strategy which is being followed in terms of a collaborative approach. You've got government, you've got academia, you've got NGOs, you've got the private sector. I think that's the approach which would be necessary as we move further down this road. And it was very interesting and heartening to know that UNICEF is also bringing all its experience from the Middle East and North Africa, and the work it has already done with 6 states in developing a measurement tool. I complimented you and I said it's topical because as many of the speakers before me have pointed out, the new education policy points out that this is the direction we have to move. It says a shift from content-based rote learning to a more holistic one, bringing in 21st century skills, talking about life skills directly. So these are aspects which have been highlighted, and a challenge is to bringing it in a manner which enables our students to acquire these competencies, skills, and move forward. The new education policy also talks about holistic progress card, which relates to the aspect of measurement to which this workshop directly relates to. And as again, many of the speakers pointed out, there are a lot of challenges in terms of developing it, making it localized, contextualizing it. And these are issues which I think all of us, those who are present here, would be facing and will have to find suitable answers to. This whole aspect of demographic dividend, the fact that the world is changing and changing at a dramatic pace. People say that the half-life of knowledge is coming down substantially. We talk about AI, fourth industrial revolution skills, the need for people to be, or students to be agile, adaptive, the fact that the world they will be facing would be more complex, more changing, and therefore the need to be more resilient. The fact that there are a lot of children who are still who are, let us say, not so privileged, are facing poverty. The fact that they should have agency so that they can take control of their lives, have a positive attitude, contribute meaningfully in a family, in society, as a citizen or as a global citizen. But these are all challenges. And if I could just quote Mark Twain, who said that I won't let my schooling interfere with my education. So we need to understand that schooling can't be seen in a very narrow or a limited manner. It has to be a much more broader mandate, which would enclose different aspects of a human being so that the education ensures that the students are able to gain these skills and competencies and therefore achieve their full potential, which is our goal. There's a lot of research which points out the benefits which are available with life skills, not only in education, which a few studies do point out, in a better environment in the classroom, better learning, better academic output, and then translating the knowledge in the field. But it's very evident in the, let's say, in the industrial sector or job sector, where we have this concept of emotional intelligence, which says, a lot of research shows that it is actually these skills of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management, which actually helps people, and especially as they grow higher in the hierarchy, to deliver things well, to implement things well, to be good managers, leaders, or employees. So there's no gainsaying the fact that it's something very vital. Now, the issue is we have a mandate, as I said, the NEP says that we have to do it. The NEP also says that you need to have a holistic progress card, which means a measurement system in place. And I think the only issue is how do we do it and how do we do it well? And that's a challenge. So it's very, I was really happy to note that there's a global audience and the research which is available and the experience which is available is there. CBSE has around 25,000 schools affiliated to it. Around 250 of these schools are abroad, outside India. And since 2003, CBSE has been advocating to its schools that we should include life skills as a part of its curriculum. In 2010, it did bring out certain manuals and train teachers to incorporate life skills in its curriculum. So it's following an approach which is mainstreaming it rather than keeping it separate. And these manuals were based on activities, and they had very simplistic assessment tools, more on questionnaires, which were answered by the students and the teachers would address. But I would say that they were at a very basic scale, more on an amateurish level. And a lot of pedagogical changes have been brought about in terms of experiential learning, project-based learning, art integrated learning, sports integrated learning, working together in projects for building up life skills. Having said that, I feel the challenges before us, or as a board personally, the first thing we see is about defining life skills. All of us pointed out there are a lot of frameworks available. It does lead to a little bit of confusion and ambiguity, and there's a necessity for bringing it down to a manageable, simple level, which, as Terry pointed out, is age-specific, contextual, related to the culture, socio-economic conditions, and it becomes really relevant. And there's a lot of hard work which might be needed on that, but that's one area. The second, our approach in CBSE, as I have told you, is about mainstreaming it, and pedagogical reforms to that extent. The new education policy also talks about it. So it's only about being able to do it well. We would be taking a large number of steps in this direction. And third, along with our colleagues in NCERT, we are developing a holistic progress card, which means the measurement of life skills. It depends. It focuses more on formative assessment. It focuses more on assessment through not only in a classroom, but through peers, teachers, obviously, through parents, and through the community to the extent possible. So it's a multidimensional feedback coming into it through a host of activities, projects, role play, collaboration. And this is a tool in the making, and I think a lot of iterative learning on the way as we do things would be coming along. And we are planning also to use an IT platform which may perhaps enhance and enable in terms of understanding the metrics and using it to give positive feedback to the students. There are dangers that these tools need to be very, very valid and reliable, to be used in a manner which actually helps the child to further improve his skills, rather than in a manner in terms of slotting a child and saying he's not up to the mark. The third, in terms of understanding, a shared understanding by everybody who's using it, so that the meaning is the same, and to the extent possible, these are objective. And fourth, we need to demystify these things so that people, we have a large number of schools spread across the country, that a teacher who is in these schools or students who are in these schools are able to understand, use it, and realize the benefits. I think once they are able to realize the benefits, it will get impetus on its own, and it would move ahead. We would look forward working with UNICEF in this endeavor also. And once again, I would thank for giving me an opportunity to present my views. I think this is the area which NEP highlights, and this is the area which is still evolving for us and developing. And we need to get all the experience, get all the people working on it together, and come up with the measurement tools, which are, as you said, localized, contextualized, culturally sensitive, and something which people actually, when they use, it can be used by teachers across the country, and when they use it, the benefits are apparent to them. So thank you very much, and I do look forward to the deliberations of this workshop.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much for your very insightful talking points this morning. We've received a few questions, so I think we'll open the session now with a very short Q&A. And I have received a few questions. I'm going to pick up one for each one of you. I'll start with Yasmin. The question is, how are life skills crucial for girls in India to develop their voice and agency? And do you see the role of measurement to be important in this space to understand what's going on in the lives of girls? Over to you, Yasmin.
Thank you. Yes, I think particularly for girls, as we do see that whether it's exposure to external media or it's exposure to further learning, non-curricular learning, and the fact that there are social norms which in many places do restrict girls, it is really important that we pay special attention to whether girls are getting access to it or not. Even on the platforms, it's not always necessary that a digital platform will support girls as much, because we know there is a digital divide in India, a strong one. And if we are really to be able to look at equality between girls and boys, at least equality in access and equality in opportunity, it's really important that we help find ways to reach girls more and more. Of course, the measurement factor is something that is important in the sense that, sorry, in the sense that it's also when we measure, and we especially look at sex disaggregated data, in that measurement, we will be learning whether it's reaching the same level and whether it's tailored really to meet the needs of both girls and boys. So the measurement will, of course, only be as good as we measure, and we have to make sure, and I know with Terry and Suman there, they will have focused on getting data or designing the system so that we do get gender disaggregated data from it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Yasmin. That brings the ball to Terry now. The question for you, Terry, is globally and in India, education systems are moving towards holistic education, at least they're talking about it. How can we pave the way in implementing life skills program and measurement in Indian context? How do we look at that as integrating?
Thanks for the question. I think as the chairman mentioned, but also Jim, it's really crucial to really look at life skills holistically. We just can't put it in a separate box and put it next to us and continue. We really need to look at learning based on experience and application, and not simple memorization and knowledge. So it's be it language, math, social studies, science, it's application. And life skills is the application of knowledge, is creativity, problem solving, negotiations. All of these skills should be part of the teaching and learning process and not something you put separate. So it's crucial that we provide an opportunity in the classroom for students to learn, apply, test, and develop capacity in these skills to take from the classroom outside the classroom, and not assume that they will magically appear later in life. It's really in school that these skills need to develop and be tested and practiced in a safe environment. So unless we do that holistically, it'd be much more challenging later on, expecting this in the work environment to happen. Over.
Thank you, Terry. Over to you, Jim. The question is, you've been doing a lot of work in the region with lots of countries, our neighboring countries. Some of them may have done a lot of work in life skills, some may be still at the nascent stage. So are we in our conversations around when we're talking about life skills measurement or integration of life skills in the programming? The question is, how can UNICEF regional office in South Asia support Indian conversations surrounding life skills and life skills measurement? What is the two-step formula that you would provide moving forward from this point onwards? Over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the question, Suman. I think the reality is that globally, not enough really is happening around life skills in most countries at the moment. As I said earlier, in my home country, there's actually been some kind of regression in the curriculum, and perhaps less emphasis on some of these more social emotional learning skills and so on, and more a move back to sort of academic focus and just focusing on the cognitive. I think this is highly regrettable. However, there are different countries in different parts of the world that are focusing more on life skills. And as I said, the Middle East and North Africa is quite an inspiring region. I think there has been work going on in Bangladesh as well, linking life skills to alternative pathways and so on. We do have a global expert in the area of life skills and assessment. We have expertise within my own office as well. So I think, as I was trying to say in my presentation, that we do also have this assessment platform we've set up in UNICEF Rosa, and we're looking for partners for that platform, and we want it to be really utilized. So we will gather whatever knowledge we can from the different parts of the world, and we will share it with the India country office. But also I'm very excited about sharing what you've been doing in the India country office with the rest of the world. Because as I was saying, I think there's been very patchy progress on this area globally. I hope that answers the question. Over.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And I think I'm going to pick one last question for the chairman CBSE, and then we will close this session because we really want to be on dot in terms of starting our next panel. So Mr. Ahuja, the question says that CBSE is playing a core role in establishing robust and holistic school education for children across India. And the question was indeed about how does the board envision integration of life skills, which you have already talked about. But I would take the next part in terms of who do you think are critical partners going to be for CBSE to work together to make this dream of integrating and looking at the measurement space by CBSE come true? Over to you.
So Suman, thank you for that question. I would define that who would be crucial on the basis that whoever brings knowledge to this issue would be crucial to it. So I would say that anybody who is able to contribute, be it in terms of knowledge, be it in terms of ability to implement it, be it in terms of their experience, is going to contribute to it. We are working, I mean, NCERT is doing it, we are working it, but as I said, it's a very, it's a challenging thing to put it on the ground, and the work therefore has to be iterative. And like Jim pointed out, in his country, they're reverting back from this to more content-based kind of an education. I think the challenge would lie in bringing what we are thinking down to the ground and making it useful for the student and teacher in, let's say, a common school in India. That's where the challenge lies. That's why the need for demystifying it, the need for making it useful and result-oriented for them, so that they see meaning in it. Once that is done, therefore it'll gain its own, ballast or propulsion and move ahead. So I would say we are agnostic. Anybody who has the wherewithal to contribute to this, we'll work with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very useful. We've got some more programmatic questions, which I think we will not be able to take up at this point of time, but we'll reach out to the speakers individually through email to whoever it was addressed. And I would hope that we get a response from you all. I am now going to move forward and request Yasmin to please come in and launch our life skills toolkit in next 5 minutes. And for everybody else's information, soon after this launch, we will open a very, very exciting panel, the soul of this whole program, after the launch. So over to you, Yasmin.
Thank you very much, Suman. And really today we are very happy to launch this life skills toolkit that consists of all the resources that we have created over the past 3 years. The resources have been made most applicable to the Indian context, and they have been developed in collaboration with experts and partners who have been working in this domain for a long time, and we will be hearing from many of them today. The resources include content for young people, educators, and how systems need to be adapted, as well as we are hosting it on UniLearn, which is a robust learning management system established by UNICEF in partnership with UNOICT. I really encourage all of us here today and all of us, everyone joining us on this launch, to really look at how you can use it to the best extent in your programs and initiatives. So I'm happy to announce this opportunity to get a peek at what the toolkit is about, and to those who contributed to its development. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasmin. Over to you, Dhruv.
Recognizing the determining role of life skills on young people's capacity and future life, UNICEF adopted a structured approach in this area. We started by leading to develop a comprehensive life skills measurement framework in partnerships with lots of partners. This framework worked as a catalyst for partnerships that has paved way for a series of resource material that was created thereafter.
Life skills are transferable skills that enable individual to deal with everyday life, helps one grows into school, work or societal life.
In collaboration with UNICEF and the Faculty of Education, Delhi University, we recently developed a holistic, self-instructional life skill input package for facilitators. The objective of this package is to enhance the quality of current programming around life skills.
It's important to see life skills in an integral fashion to the whole process of education. And I think that is what UNICEF was able to do, and we supported them in this.
With the support of UN Office of ICT, UNICEF digitized the Life Skill Resource Pack into self-paced online courses for teachers and students. The courses are now hosted on one-of-a-kind learning management system, UniLearn.
Young Lives developed India's first comprehensive life skills measurement tool to assess life skills of adolescents in the age group of 11 to 14 years. This tool has been developed in 3 languages. It has an innovative storyline format with vignettes related to lives of adolescents in the Indian context.
In February 2020, 99 master trainers from 33 districts of Assam have been trained on the life skill material. In August, again, master trainers from Assam have taken up the online course on life skills on UniLearn platform and provided their feedback. Their capacities were built on the digitized life skill measurement tool for elementary level.
Life skills have helped me in changing my attitude towards the teaching profession, and most importantly, it helped me change the methodology of my teaching.
Thank you, Yasmin. With this, we've opened out our life skills toolkit for public use. Anyone and everybody can go on to this and explore for yourself and see how this works for us. So thank you all the speakers. Thank you very much. We will now move on to the next session, which is our panelists have already joined in, and this is my honor to introduce some very powerful speakers who are bringing global and international as well as national expertise to this webinar. We have 2 international speakers with us, Professor Esther Kev and Professor Andrew Dawes. And we have Dr. Sridhar Srivastava, who is Director NCERT, Dr. Renu Singh, who is the Executive Director from Young Lives India and the Country Director. And we have Alexander, who is a Global Head of CSR SAP our partner in this whole journey. I will introduce the speakers first, very briefly, and then open out the panel by organizing a kind of an interactive panel, asking a few questions. And I hope our panelists would be able to speak and discuss the questions that are raised, spending about 10 minutes each or more. And we hope that we will be able to derive some very important lessons to take forward from this webinar and a pathway to move on this point forward. So I'm introducing Professor Esther Kerr. She's the Professorial Fellow, University of Melbourne. She's in Melbourne at this point of time, getting late for her, but thank you for joining us. She's an eminent expert who's recognized and respected globally for her distinguished work in 21st century skills. A former senior fellow with the Brookings Institution in DC, she leads global projects which explore the integration of 21st century skills into nations, education, policy, and practice, with a particular focus on assessment of these skills. So that's very crucial for us today. A professorial fellow at the University of Melbourne in Australia, Esther publishes widely in peer-reviewed international journals in psychometrics, educational psychology, assessment and education reform. Many of you may have read her work. She's most recently engaging in Asia and Africa at national levels in assessment of curricular proficiencies and the development of 21st century skills assessment, and at global level in surveying student opportunities to acquire a breadth of skills being provided by countries' education systems. So very relevant for us to continue to work with you, Professor Esther, in this space. Professor Andrew Dawes, our next panelist, he's Associate Professor Emeritus, University of Cape Town, and a Research Associate with Young Lives, University of Oxford. So for a doctor, as pathological tests are critical to assess health status. Similarly, to assess health of education and life skills, psychometric tests are most critical. So it's not just any kind of testing, but testing that is solid, which is based on research and theoretical proposition. So we have a professor who is pioneer with us in this field, and he is a clinical and applied development psychologist, emeritus associate professor in Department of Psychology at the University of Cape Town, and as I said, a research associate with the University of Oxford. It's very interesting to understand that in the 80s, he, along with colleagues, established an anti-apartheid mental health organization. And then he was a co-founder in University of Cape Town's Children's Institute, where he served as a deputy director. Thereafter, he was appointed as research director in the Human Sciences Research Council of South Africa, informing policy on the development of child rights and well-being indicators for South Africa. So these were very, very important. The indicators also were around violence to children, early learning, and development. In 2010, he was elected a fellow of the Association of Psychological Science, which many of us know as APS. He's in addition to 8 co-authored and edited volumes, he's produced many journal articles, books, chapters, and research report. So he's with us today, and so is from our government, from NCERT, National Council for Education, Research and Training, Dr. Sridhar Srivastava. He is the director acting at this point of time. A person actually who's totally dedicated his life to the field of education in our country for past 27 years and still working here. He was a joint director NCERT and ex-chairman NIOS, National Institute of Open Schooling, and has an experience of 27 years, including lecturer in statistics in several universities and a professor. And he's also an experience in active policy level engagement with state governments and agencies. He's been really guiding a large-scale assessment surveys under SSA and RMSA. He also provides academic support in conducting national state level training programs for state and district level education administrators. So he would be really supporting us to understand how do we engage as NCERT and what is the thinking of NCERT moving forward here. Dr. Renu Singh, she's the Executive Director, Young Lives. She has over 27 years of experience in school management, teacher education, policy analysis and research, both in India and abroad. She's a founder of Young Lives, as you know, in India, a research to policy center. Is also the country director of Young Lives India, who are leading a longitudinal study on childhood poverty, University of Oxford, for many years. She's a trained educational psychologist, Montessorian, and special educator. What a beautiful combination. And she was head directress of a school in Dubai, but she's been very much rooted with our programs, grassroots, setting up Center for Early Childhood Development Research in Jamia Millia Islamia, for example, working on the life skills measurement piece with education. So several flags to her feathers to her cap. Then we have Alexandra from SAP, a woman who has really worked hard to nurture and apply her life skills to her own life and become a role model for girls and women. Starting, I was told, from an HR role to tap the sensitive heart of corporates like SAP to beat for the cause of children and young people. That's what she's been doing, helping SAP to help the world run better and improve people's lives. So strategic and this she brings in by bringing in strategic partnerships and programs that deliver sustainable social impact and long-term business value. She looks at corporate giving, volunteerism, and the development of multi-stakeholder partnerships. So here we are. Welcome to all our panelists. Thank you to be with us. And how, as I said, we will organize this panel is by asking a critical question for you to answer and get our audience more oriented towards the nuances and theories of what we are talking about in terms of measurement. So I begin, is everyone ready? I begin and open this panel with Professor Esther Kerr. So Esther, my question to you would be that you've worked a lot on 21st century skills. You've worked a lot on life skills. We would want to understand from you, is there a role for assessment of life skills? And if so, what is it? How do we constructively use life skills assessment to support learning of adolescents and young people? So that's what the core is. We want whatever assessment we do is able to support strengthening of learning. Learning needs to be the core focus here. So would love to hear your thoughts on what is the role that you think, what are the challenges you think are being posed technically and practically as we go around assessing life skills. Over to you, Esther.
Thank you, Suman, and thank you for asking me. UNICEF has been doing such fantastic work in what's a very challenging field, the assessment of life skills, and you've really been pushing the knowledge forward, and I am aware of how very, very difficult this is to do. So just to go directly to your question, and just be aware I can't see the slides because I think they're up on the YouTube option. And so I'm just going to my second slide now. So I just want to talk a little bit about that immediate question. You know, what is the purpose of assessing life skills? And as I hope you can see there, I've put up 5 possible functions that assessment of life skills might inform. And the issue for me is that we really do need to focus on learning. So I do obviously think there is a role for assessment of life skills, but I lean very much toward it being facilitating the development of the life skills. So that's both directly with the student, but it can also, the development activity of assessment can also act as a really useful strategy for educators to engage in, because it helps them to think about how can you assess what is it that you're looking for when we're thinking about the development of different life skills, whether they're cognitive or social emotional. So the justifications for me is the issue. If we look at this first one, project or program evaluation, obviously that is a justified use of assessment of life skills. And, there's a great deal of funding going into programs all over the world in life skills. And it's important that those who are implementing those programs can establish that, in fact, they are doing something that is relevant to what the donor wants and what the community needs. So one of the big issues, of course, with project or program evaluation is that often the NGOs that are implementing those are not themselves research institutions. And so they look all over the place to try to find decent assessment tools. And we need to make sure, and I'll come back to this, that the tool that you use is actually a tool that is relevant to the program that you're actually implementing. You can't necessarily just pick assessment tools from anywhere. So something to think about there. The next one, and I think I'll just say next, and a little green button should come up on the slide, system level monitoring. So if we think of a basic education system, a formal education system, that system does need to know whether it's fulfilling its goals. And so if an education system is including life skills in some form or other in their curriculum, in their learning objectives, then they need to find a way to identify whether they're fulfilling those goals. So for that reason, you might also want to assess life skills. And notice that my point here is that it's not about assessing the students. It's obviously you need to do that, but the focus is really on assessment of the system. Is the system able to deliver on what it needs to? Then next, you'll see another little green ring come up, supporting student learning. And for me, this is the big one, that if we can learn how to assess life skills in students, then that will help teachers understand where they need to intervene. And so that's one of the big primary reasons for me for assessing. So I can't see a place for national examinations of life skills. And that's primarily because of the really potential negative effects that we get quite often from examinations, because it can actually undermine what our real focus is, which is this focus on learning. So particularly at large scale, of course, if you're doing examinations, test questions often prioritise correct answers, and correct answers aren't necessarily the best way of getting an accurate assessment of life skills. So for me, national examinations and similarly class level summative assessment, I don't see a big role within the normal mainstream. We need to keep the focus on learning. So Suman, I don't know if that answers your question on that one.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I can come back to you with some of the challenges. I'm quickly going to move to Professor Andrews. Professor, why do you think it's important to develop reliable and validated tools for life skills measurement in a multilingual context? And what are the critical elements of that process?
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to everyone for being here this morning. Thank you, Esther, for your excellent points. Please excuse my headgear. I can't hear very well if I don't have it on. It's a life skill which I'm learning slowly but surely, probably 19th century rather than 20th century or 21st, but I'll give it a try. There is a slide presentation. Is that on? Okay, jolly good. There we go. I'll just say next slide each time, should I? When we go through this. Okay, so very good points have been made by Esther so far. I'm very pleased to see that your wonderful comprehensive life skills program is available now. I tried to click on it and download it yesterday or the day before, but of course it hadn't been launched, so I couldn't do it. But I am, firstly, just a disclaimer, I'm not a life skills fundi at all. I've worked mainly in early development and child protection, and have developed my expertise around these things, such as it is, in terms of assessing learning, development of learning in maths and language in multilingual contexts, particularly South Africa, and in young lives in the various countries. So one of the things I've learned about this is the complexity of working in multilingual contexts with any of the areas that Esther has been talking about here. This is not a simple matter, and I think the question of purpose is very, very important. So let me run through a few points. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, and the one after that. Okay, so we've already started the conversation on purpose. What for? One of the purposes that I will add to what Esther was talking about is, do you want something that can give you a national snapshot of the life skills process, rather like a Pearl's life skills test or or something like that? I think that's an important question that you need to ask, because often governments ask us the question, well, how are we doing? Are we reaching our targets? Are these children life skilled at the end of the process? And that, I think, is a serious question to ask, and to come back to government to say, well, what would you do with it if you knew anyway, right? So that's really, really important there. Then I think what kind of data you're going to collect is obviously critical there. We've also heard other speakers talk about the key life skills, and UNICEF has this list of literacy, numeracy, digital communication, and so on. One of the things I'd want to ask about this project is, I like the two terms, well-being and well-becoming. In the child rights literature and well-being literature, these are important ideas. It seems to me that a lot of the emphasis on life skills, I may be wrong because I'm not in the field, speaks to how children are well-becoming. They're going towards adulthood, the life skills that they'll exit with. I think you may want to think very carefully about how important well-being is. In other words, communication skills at 10 years old, 15 years old, and so on. How does that help the child grow in various areas holistically, as one of the previous commentators said? So are they fit for purpose? And then when do you measure these things? I know that the idea is that life skills would follow through from early development right through to the other end, but the challenges of measurement are there. The challenges of comparison across age are there. Because if you're going to do that, you're going to have to standardize your measures. You're going to have to derive Z scores, for example, in order to compare 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and so on. And you're going to have to do that if you're going to compare children across different language groups. And I know that India has a rather large group of national languages, I think something like 22, if I'm not wrong. So then what do you want to know? And then is it summative? Is it a measure of child status at a particular time? And so on. So these are, I think, important questions that we need to entertain. And I can hear from previous discussion that you're already very much engaged with them. Next slide, please. So when you're going into classrooms with your curriculum or your assessment, what are the languages of learning and teaching, the LOLTs, that are operating there? Now, in my country, South Africa, we have Indigenous language learning and teaching in the first 5 grades, and then it's switched, and English starts to merge in until English becomes the main language of teaching after that. But we actually know that in many classrooms we have multiple languages. There is no one lot. You'll have isiXhosa, you'll have English, you'll have kids from Zimbabwe speaking Shona, and how can we expect the teacher to have Zulu as the language of learning and teaching? So they all eventually trip into English because it works, and children learn in English. So complex things, particularly at the lower grades of schooling. As you move into the higher grades, it becomes more simple because the whole lot's in English, but the competence in English will be highly variable. And I know that that kind of thing happens in India as well. So comprehension, reading skills. And from our Young Lives work, we know that there are lots of issues around that at all levels, but even through to the higher grades in school in the Indian sample that we have. How do they vary across SES, language and cultural background? They do. So your test design and all this stuff has to be taken into account. Then are we talking about a test? Esther would say no, this is primarily to support learning of these things in school rather than having outcome measures of some sort. That's your call. When we and I think somebody else spoke earlier about giving information back to schools, there can be serious issues and ethical issues as well, I think, about having a sort of school report card. Johnny's up here on social emotional skills, Susie's down here, oh dear, what do we do now? I think that is a political question, an ethical question, as well as a test design question. It's not just a test question. Next one, please. Okay, so you're probably familiar with these things. The construct definition and specification need and test structure is critical. How many items do you want to measure if you're going to develop a test, the scaling thereof, and then all the other things that flow from that if you're going for tests, like a language assessment, a life skills assessment of problem-solving ability, and so on. How would you generate items? And then if you're going for scales, you have to do factor analysis and all these sorts of other things, establish your reliability and validity. So it really comes back, all this stuff sits on top of the word purpose. What's this for? Because you're not going to develop a test if that's not what you're going to use these things for. Next one, please. Okay, so this is more about test stuff, item development. Do the items measure your constructs? Now, translation, as I have learned over a number of years, is a huge issue in my country, and I know it is in India as well. A lot of people use measures developed in other countries. Is this a good idea or not? I mean, there's a lot of imperialism in measurement. If you work, I've often worked with American or British colleagues and say, no, we must use this British test or this American test. And I say, hang on a minute, it hasn't been standardized here, hasn't been developed here. Do you know that people understand these constructs in the same way in Urdu, in Hindi, and in English developed in Bristol in the United Kingdom? So really important issues. So I've found that it's best to use double translation. That is, two people sit together, to take the test, translate it separately, come back and have a conversation, modify it, and then put it out, and then discuss it with the people who live and work in the area where the instrument is to be applied. The teachers in the schools. I've found some extraordinarily wonderful and rather funny examples of getting the translation done, taking it to a school, and the kids look at this and they say, what do you mean, sir? I have no idea what this is. Even though we've followed all these fine procedures, but on the ground in that area is a different language to use. Piloting, very important, and then getting qualitative reports on children's understandings of both instructions and the items of this sort of thing. Really important. And then finalize, adjust, and you probably have to go through this list a little all over again. Okay, next one. And then the psychometry, items get retained, they get chucked out, reliability, validity, all these sorts of things, which I won't go into detail because I think you're probably familiar with them. They're up there for later if you want to look. And the next one, please. So one of the questions for life skills item analysis there, is it for a survey where you have binary responses, you get percentage of children with yes, no. We have items like this in young lives, but then you want to standardize those scales, because if you want to compare 15-year-olds and 18-year-olds, they're different. The items may be different. The test may be longer. Is it summative? We've heard from Esther that this is perhaps not a good idea, but if you go that route, that's up to you. Item difficulty, are these things equally understood by the children of the different ages? They probably aren't very often, particularly if there's a big age gap. And then the psychometric properties of the scale themselves, starting off with unidimensional. Is there a factor there that you can measure? Okay, next. This is something I have learned to my great cost, is that when we do these things, when we go out there and measure these things, we often want to measure everything. Somebody comes with another idea. Why don't we bolt on that? Why don't we ask them that? And you end up with a whole pile in these days paper. Now you end up with columns and rows of data, I suppose, and you don't know what on earth to do with it. So my my advice to people is keep it straight and simple if you're going to do these things, and focus on the core skills that you think are important. One of the other take homes there is, rather than the sort of pencil and paper or touchpad thing, observations of what children actually do on the ground, I think is very important. But then you need to have very carefully designed manuals that tell you what you're looking for. Don't just say, is the child's behavior cooperative? Well, what do you mean by that? Age-appropriate cooperativeness. You need to have a little description of precisely what that would mean. Okay, I think that's me nearly done. Next one. There's some references up there that might be useful. You can pick those up later. And then the last slide. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Professor Andrew. This is very helpful, going through the whole technicalities and the process, the elements that are required, especially how do you look at elements, the whole technical aspects of constructing instruments and why and how of it. That brings me back to Professor Esther. Esther, I would want to ask you, looking at what is required in terms of the critical process that has been laid out, what do you think are the main challenges posed both technically and practically in assessing life skills? So here I would want you to also talk about some of the international challenges that are faced in measuring life skills. So addressing the fact that although many skills are ubiquitous and might be seen similarly in different contexts, others are different due to cultural norms. So would really want look forward to your response on that. Esther?
Absolutely, thank you. Look, I think that Andy's really set the stage very nicely for me there in going through all of the technical side of matters. And if you could put up my third slide, that would be really useful for going into this a little bit more clearly. So when you see the slide in front of you, because I don't think it's there just yet, what you will see is that UNICEF's graphic, an adaptation really of the 4 pillars, learning to be, learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together. And so one of the big issues for us in assessment of life skills is what I refer to as construct overlap. So you can see it now on the screen. So if you look, for example, even at the learning to know little section on that, you can see that there's problem solving and critical thinking. Now, we know that there's a great deal of overlap between those 2 constructs. They both contribute to each other. So when people try to put together an assessment tool that is going to target both critical thinking and problem solving, they're not going to separate very nicely as individual constructs because they share so much variance. And so we need to be very, very clear about what it is that we're going to measure. I think if you think also about the other areas, if you look at their under learning to be, we've got resilience and self-awareness. And again, obviously self-awareness will be contributing to a student's development of resilience. So when we try to measure those constructs as though they're totally separate, that's not going to work too well. So there are all of these issues associated with how do we go about assessing life skills when so many of them are so strongly interrelated. So that's one of the sort of technical challenges that we see, I believe. And another one goes to this issue about the nature of the life skills themselves. A lot of these skills enable action, but the skills themselves are not necessarily visible, right? We can't necessarily always see them. So we can't always see a student engaging in problem solving. I mean, they might furrow their brow, but they might just be doing that to make, for another reason. You don't know what that reason is. So quite often we don't see the outcomes of the skills that the students are developing until much later. So how do we capture those behaviours? And of course, we've mentioned right through this webinar already that there's self-report, there's obviously use of vignettes. There are some more active ways of capturing behavior, but nonetheless, life skills, when we're thinking about the cognitive and the social emotional ones, are particularly challenging. How can we capture a behavior, because it's fleeting? And if there's a teacher in the classroom with 40, 50, 60 students, or even with just 10, it's almost impossible to capture those behaviors. So how can we capture those proficiencies in a way that really does let the teacher and the student understand what it is that the interest is in the development? So that's another big challenge. And the third point I put there is this one about establishing proficiency levels. How do we know what a useful or a good or an appropriate level of development of resilience is? Isn't that going to vary not only across children, but across context, across culture, across how you express resilience and so on? So that issue of establishing levels is a real problem in the assessment of life skills, because it's not as though we have a traditional curriculum in mathematics or in literacy where we know what a beginning level is and a later level is. This is a new area for us to have a look at. So how do we decide what is useful and what's not? So if we start looking at these questions globally, could I have the next slide, please? What you'll see here is applying some of these issues to thinking about it more globally. And I think, Suman, you wanted me to continue to talk about this, just to finish this off. Wave at me if I'm wrong.
Sure, absolutely. Continue, please.
Great. So if we look at some of these global challenges, now the first one is again about just the nature of assessment of life skills. And of course, traditionally in education systems, we have prioritized knowledge. It's easier for test developers or for teachers to test knowledge, because you can tell a student something and then you can ask the student a question about that and you find out whether they have taken that information, whether they've stored it, and whether they can pull it out again, whether they can retrieve it. But when we're talking about skills, we're not interested in whether a student gets a skill right or wrong. We're interested in their level of development. Are they growing? Are they maturing? Are they developing the skills and the capacities with which they're going to be able to deal with not only the school environment, but the home environment, with life and with society more generally? So we have a problem with some traditional approaches to assessment that need to be put aside if we're going to start thinking about constructive use of life skills assessment. The next point here is one that Andy was just talking about, this issue around, do we have the same construct across different cultures? So we might use the same word for the same construct. We might say collaboration in Indonesia or collaboration in Australia. And we might think we're referring to the same thing. However, translation of a word doesn't always make the meaning behind that word parallel. So as an example, the Vietnamese word for cooperation is the same as the Vietnamese word for collaboration. So where in English we discriminate between these two, that's not the case in the equivalent word in Vietnamese. Doesn't mean that they might not have a different idea about those two words, but it's not in that translated version. In Indonesia, they have the concept of gotong royong, which if you translate it straight into English says social collaboration. And we would think, well, what's the point of saying social? We know collaboration is social, but what the translation has been about has been an interpretation that for them, gotong royong is about collaborating in a social community orientation. So it has, the constructs are different. So if we put together a test or an assessment of collaboration in one country, that test is not necessarily going to be appropriate for use to test that what we think is the same construct in another culture, because it might not be. So we have to check. We have to find out what is the definition, what is the description, what is the structure, so that we can make sure if we want to use assessment tools across different cultures or communities, we need to make sure that they're appropriate. And the same issue, of course, goes with the items that are on tests. And even if we've got the construct similar across constructs, it might be that individual items that contribute to a test might be picking up on different aspects of daily life in a community, or they might be interpreted in different ways. So, for example, in a test I've looked at recently, which is looking at different aspects of global citizenship, an item was, I protest against teachers if they make decisions without involving students. Now, depending on what the community perspective is about all sorts of things, including respect, that item will have very different interpretations in the different countries. And so it won't load on scales tests of these life skills in the same way. Or if you have an item like at school, I make friends with children of all ethnicities. This makes an assumption that the daily life of the child is one in which there are multiple ethnicities. So we have to be very careful about looking at the items that we're using to target the different constructs. And then finally, this issue of normative reference concepts. And we, again, going back to a traditional assessment paradigm, we've been using normative referencing for test development for a very long time. Now, we've moved reasonably well away from it, but I think we need to be very careful. So when we're looking at the assessment of life skills, surely we're not interested in saying one child is better than another. We're interested in identifying the level of development of each child and what they can or cannot do. So we're actually interested in criterion referencing. Is the child able to deal with this particular scenario in an adaptive way, is the question, not whether one child deals with it better than another. So this issue about putting aside normative frames of reference is a really important thing, I think. So Suman, I'll leave it there for you, and we can come back to some of the other issues as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. And actually, Renu must also be thinking that these are some of those questions. When we were looking at our piece of work in India, we went back and forth, Renu, so many times looking at the same things and same questions, and particularly about the appropriateness of different contexts and cultures and situations to the, appropriateness of the tool to different contexts and cultures. And we kept saying, well, the same tool will not work everywhere. Standardization will not work everywhere, but it's very difficult to convince people. And second important thing which resonates with me is, I think it's also applied to the education system per se, the cognitive domain. Why do we compare children in terms of performance? It's important to see child as a person who keeps developing and getting nurtured, and how do we best strengthen those capacities, whether it is cognitive or life skills. So thank you, Esther, for bringing this very strong points, and gives me goosebumps looking at our meetings behind us. Moves us to Renu, and Renu, you would want to talk a bit more about how did this whole landscape analysis, you did a very extensive analysis of all the existing tools in India or outside, and we didn't have very much in India, I remember. And then we decided to do a situation analysis in 5 states in India where we thought we would be rolling out this whole program. So your thinking and your insights into how did it help you in developing the life skills measurement tool, LSMT, here in the Indian context? So that would be very relevant and logical thinking moving forward for our audience. Over to you, Renu.
Thank you, Suman, and afternoon to everybody. Good morning to others on the panel and listening in. I think, it's really wonderful to be here today after almost 2.5 years of work on trying to develop this tool. It was extremely challenging, and I think we've had a great partnership with UNICEF, who were open to us going back and forth and not coming up with a tool immediately, and pulling it out of the box, because this has truly been an iterative process. The situation analysis was the first step that we did. I remember going into 5 states of Jharkhand, Assam, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh with the team, and in January, of 2019, and actually talking to children, going and talking to education officials, teachers, observing classroom processes of transactions, and also doing a curriculum review, along with parallelly looking at tools and risks for measurement that were available both globally and in India. And of course, because we've been given the task of looking at children, particularly young adolescents who were in the 11 to 14 age group, studying in grades 6 to 8 in India, across government schools. And our focus was primarily looking at the state schools, and working with our UNICEF state offices, who supported us in being able to meet all these people. I think it was huge learning, because we realized that there were different priorities and understanding of life skills itself, so while some people looked at life skills as something that would help in financial independence only, others looked at it from a medical perspective, we've already talked about it, others looked at it as something that were actually psychosocial competencies that would support in making life choices. And I think there was this myriad understanding also that existed, which helped us come back, and relook at and work with Suman and others and other colleagues who were working at that time on the life skills framework that was being drawn out. And that's when, I think, so this iterative process itself was extremely informative. And we also realized that when we spoke to children, life skills really was an add-on class. We never saw even one class where it was truly integrated, where, teachers were teaching science and they were looking at a life skills as part of the lesson plan and being able to look at certain aspects and then doing a formative assessment. That wasn't available at all. But children enjoyed even this add-on class, because they said things like, we don't have to pick up our books, we don't have to open our books and our bags. And I think it was still something they thought was enjoyable. Teachers gave us feedback that, we have these manuals, and different states had made different manuals. But a lot of them said, we keep on repeating the same thing, because it was still very manual oriented. It was not really based on experiential learning. It was not, we hadn't really built the competencies of our teachers to be able to themselves think of activities rather than just refer to the manual. And I think that's the space we all want to go to. But I think this was all very informative. And of course, I think the fact we realized was that, yes, we needed to come up with a tool that would be not just easy for this 11 to 14-year-old children to follow. We wanted it to be student-led, and we realized that children, rather than leave, because if we had found that teachers could just, based on observations, come up with an assessment and a formative assessment process, we would have let it at that. But I think we realized even those competencies were lacking, and maybe it was best to start looking at a tool that children could look at. But it needed to be something they could relate to. So therefore, we came up with this idea of vignettes. We did not find any other tool that was following this format. So it was really starting from scratch. And huge challenges, because to be honest, we thought, other than Assam, where the Assamese tool was being developed, we thought we had 4 Hindi-speaking states. But the Hindi in these Hindi-speaking states was not the same. So when we began pilots, we realized that, oh my God, what is being spoken in Dungarpur is the Hindi dialect in Barmer in Rajasthan was absolutely different. So we had to relook at the difficulty level, and we through the pre-pilot. So we were supposed to basically do 1 pre-pilot and 2 pilots before we went into 5 state pilots with the final tool. We had to do 3 pre-pilots and 4 pilots, because each time we came back and we found, oh my God, this language is too difficult. The discrimination, we had to look at item discrimination. Esther mentioned that. How do we look at the constructs? And finally, we decided we had to look at 3 domains. We had to drop self-awareness for the very reason that Esther mentioned. We ran PCAs and exploratory factor analysis, and we were able to then come up with 3 buckets. So we have now the cognitive bucket, in which you have problem solving, decision making, and critical thinking. You have the personal domain, which has the life skills of creativity, resilience, and participation. And then you have the interpersonal domain, which has negotiation, communication, and resilience.
Thank you, Renu. Very, very useful. And I hope the audience also has benefited in terms of seeing how we have been able to apply all our thinking, discussions, and making it reality in terms of creating a tool which was worth taking forward in the 5 states. Moving on to Dr. Sridhar Srivastava. So Dr. Srivastava, we've been hearing about the whole importance of life skills by all the speakers, by all the panelists. We've also recognized that now new education policy, the Education Policy 2020, is saying huge emphasis on life skills. So what is NCERT's vision on the measurement piece of life skills? Over to you, Dr. Srivastava. So you're on mute, looks like. Dhruv. I think your mic is not working. You are not audible. So we'll come back to you till you fix this problem, sir. Is that good? Oh no, you are.
You need permission from your side.
Dhruv, do you need to give permission? Hello, sir, can you just speak one more time? You just have to be loud a bit. Can you say hello? Dr. Srivastava, can you please speak loudly? Okay, we'll wait for Dr. Srivastava to come back. It would have been interesting to talk about NCERT's focus and everything on life skills, and I think we'll get back. No permissions are required here. Actually, his mic is probably, and connectivity at his hand, which is playing games. Sir, you seem to be on mute. Are you back with us? No. Okay, I'm moving on to Alexander. Thank you for being up so early for us. I think you're in that part of the globe. And good to see you one more time. Alexander, why we thought we would have your perspective is because SAP has been supporting a lot of work around life skills and also life skills measurement. We wanted to understand from you, do you think going forward industries, corporates, people like SAP, others, will focus on assessing competencies while recruiting candidates? I mean, more than looking at the percentage, the college where the students are coming from, you would be looking at how competent a person or what kind of skills the person has. Depending on your answer, we would also then try and understand what is the implication of this on measurement of the competencies going forward. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. It's a pleasure being with all of you today. And I'm especially happy to be here on this incredible occasion that we're launching the Digitized Life Skills Resource Pack for schools, which we all know is so incredibly important for bringing not just children in general forward, but also transforming education systems. You know, in regards to your question, let me try and make it really concrete. And I'm going to take a look at sort of my own team and the way that our work is changing. And in that regard, what that means in terms of the kinds of skills and competencies that we require. And I think so what my team represents is maybe not what every team in the world faces, but I think is increasingly what many organizations and companies are moving towards, and thus what kind of skills and competencies people are looking for. So when I look at my own team, we are a small team, but spread across the globe. So we start with team members in Australia, going all the way to the West Coast in the US. That means that our team has to work primarily virtually together. So that's one thing, it's sort of the virtual. Because we're so spread across the globe, our working hours are also not 9 to 5, as maybe a lot of people are used to, because we have to accommodate so many different time zones. The other thing that we see as well in terms of our own team is that roles and responsibilities become more fluid. So whereas in the past, people would have a very clear-cut job description, you know, which is still to a large extent true, we expect much more flexibility in terms of what individuals contribute to with regards to the team and the results that we want to achieve. Again, going back to us being such a global team, cultural awareness and cultural literacy is incredibly important because we heard a few times today, you know, what might be true in one culture and in one language can be understood in a very different way for somebody else. And the other thing, because of the team being so incredibly global, what we also see is a decentralization of decision making. So that basically means that sort of these hierarchical structures that we might be used to in terms of how teams are organized are blurring. And I'm saying all of this with the example of my team just to sort of explain how on a team level, the future of work is really changing the way that individuals are contributing and are behaving and are working. And I think a few of the things that we have seen that are more important than anything else, and some of the things we've heard about today already, like problem solving, critical thinking, but a few others that I think haven't been mentioned as strongly is agility, which is probably tied to resilience. But the other huge aspect is self-organization, and which probably has a bit to do with self-awareness and self-structure. Because if you're not able to structure yourself and organize yourself across these much more fluid lines, you're actually going to be lost in terms of the deliverables and the work packages that you're supposed to be working on. So this is just a bit of an example in terms of how within our team we're a reflection of basically the future of work. And you were asking, you know, what that means in terms of recruiting as well. Again, very concretely, when I look at myself as somebody who hires, I put much more emphasis on life skills and on competencies than I do on hard skills. Because ultimately life skills and competencies are transferable, and hard skills are easier to learn. They're quicker to learn. So if I am going to onboard somebody and I know that I need to invest in their learning, which you as a company have to do anyway, you know that when you bring people on board, you will have to engage with employees on a continuous basis with regards to learning. Lifelong learning, we all know, is an absolute critical component, and that's also true in companies like ours. So what you're looking for is much more at transferability of skills, or at least I do, rather than hard skills. The difficulty with that is, as we've heard quite a lot, is not just assessing that on a systems basis, but actually also on an individual basis. How do you know, as a hiring manager, just through a conversation, what those transferable skills actually look like and how they would, what they would look like in real life? So one of the things that has worked, that I think works for a lot of people, is giving a recruit or somebody who you're interviewing an actual concrete task to fulfill. And frankly, there it's not so much about what exactly they do, it's more about how they do it. So explaining the process in terms of how they go about fulfilling the task is just as much a component of that assessment in a way as is sort of the what comes out of the task that you've given them. So that's a little bit of a long back and forth on and trying to make it a bit concrete in terms of what the world looks like in a company like ours, which I think is quite indicative of where the world is moving towards in terms of employment and the future of work.
Thank you very much, Alex. In fact, I think all the audience ears would have perked up thinking that life skills is the way to go if you want to join something like SAP or other organizations who are really focusing on having these skills more importantly in the candidates going forward. So thank you for sharing that thought. I hope we can have Professor Sridhar back with us. So Dr. Sridhar, would you want to? Absolutely audible. Perfect. So should I repeat my question to you, sir? It's about the emphasis. Yes. So it's about the emphasis, given the emphasis on life skills in NAP. And we've all been working in the area of life skills for a long, long time. What is the NCERT's vision for life skills measurement going forward? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, my apologies for not getting connected earlier. And again, thank you for giving me this opportunity. You know, when we are, or when as a panelist you are towards the end, so it is a benefit as well as deficit also. The benefit is that I have listened to all others earlier, and deficit in a way that many of the things which were there in my mind have already spoken. But in any case, this both situation is helping me. And I tell you, after the launch of the tool and even before that, many of the speakers were a little apprehensive, scientifically, I would say that about the piloting of the tool. And after listening to Professor Andy and Esther, there also many things came before us. As regard to NCERT, you know, the vision is very exhaustive in the sense that you might be aware that the learning outcomes which NCERT came out with, their 2017, right from there, first of all, we say and we posit it in all our documents that we have to move ahead of content mastery. And when we talk of competency, so in that many of the 21st century skills, or even otherwise the life skills which are very important, they are already there. And we want to impress upon the teachers, state functionaries, and everyone in the system that these things are very important. And we feel that if we talk of stakeholders, so mainly I am saying this as regard to life skills, that student is a stakeholder, teacher is a stakeholder, parents are also a stakeholder. Mainly I am talking about those parents who are literate. I'm not saying that the parents who themselves are not that literate, they have not been to schools and all. They might be possessing certain life skills or the resilience, but I'm mainly talking about the urban centric parents. There also it is very important that they should be also made capable of appreciating the life skills. And one more point that we think that teacher training is very, very important. That's why in the NISTA training capacity building program, we are trying to bring into that a few modules and certain sections in the assessment also, where we talk about these skills. And pre-service teaching, teacher training. Pre-service teacher training, because when Renu was mentioning about her experiences meeting with the teachers and going to schools, there we feel that if we put all these things and the teacher preparation activities going on, means our BA, DMED programs, when the prospective teacher is in making, there also these things should be pitched very empathetically. And the most important thing is that beyond the cognitive skills, these skills should be impressed upon with those teachers also who are in making. One very important point, I would like to reemphasize what was said by Jim. You see, for example, the communication skill is very important. Measurement of communication skill is very important, but at the same time, miscommunication skill is also very important to be seen, that any communication should not turn into miscommunication. And this is an issue. We know that the kind of skills that we require, for example, creativity and innovation and problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, communication. So the most important point I feel that in the classroom, if the children are provided opportunity of exhibiting such skills and the teacher is equipped at least thematically to observe such skills, that is a very, very important point. And a few skills that which we feel that it is very important, and it is important from the school time, and it moves when the child moves into the higher education, and the child and the as a youth, he or she joins the world of work. Then also certain skills are very important, which we feel that we can introduce these kind of skills right from very beginning. For example, the ethical reasoning, or how to cope with the stress, or how to cope with other kind of emotions. So in the foundational literacy and numeracy that we are teaching very empathetically now, and as you all know that the National Education Policy 2020 mentioned it very, very empathetically, and the government along with different agency is working for that. There also in the different goals, we are trying to just introduce these things at very early stages also. For example, in a development goal like health and well-being, if the child at the very early stage, at the age 3 or 4, we have mentioned certain learning outcomes, but when the child proceeds further and he or she reaches to the age of 8 or 9, that outcome turns into like a child demonstrate care and respect for others. And in case of any individual activity or group activity, if the early stage means early age means at 3 or 4, it is simply like participating in that activity or group activity, individual activity. Then when the child reaches to the age of 8 or 9, it turns in that the child takes activity and observes rules, and he has respect for others' participation, and he's showing the skill of cooperating with others. So we are trying in that manner, and we are we are very clear that these skills are very important, and the learning outcomes that we are designing or we are putting across with different stakeholders, the life skill is a very important area that we are coming out with. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Srivastava. Just a very quick question on that, because we understand that NCERT has a critical role to play across the country in terms of developing the capacities and strengths of the functionaries, also to take forward the whole piece around life skills and measurement. So do you recognize some critical partners that could be there to support NCERT in this journey as you roll it out across states?
Yes, Suman, partners are very important. First of all, we being from the government side, and moreover, NCERT as an institution have always thought about the bottom of the pyramid. If somebody was mentioning about 250 or 260 million children across the school in the country, so whenever this figure comes before us, we think of the bottom of the pyramid and the kind of diversity that we are having across the country. And one of your speaker was mentioning about the tool, and she was saying that the language translation, these are issues in any such measurement tool, and the cultural context is a big issue. So we would like, and we would wish, and we would desire that any such tool should be well piloted across the different region in the country and different management of schools in different situation. And we know that multi-grade teaching is a reality in many of the areas in the country. So in all these efforts, we would surely look for partner, and we will be having a very good interaction with the Ministry of Education, our parent ministry, and we are open to collaboration. And most of the time we'll look for very critical cooperation from the states, because state functionaries or state agencies like SCERT, SIs, so in that interaction also for documentation and for a very productive discussion, we can look for partners. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you. So that, because we are running short of time and this discussion is actually warming up now, we could have gone for hours together with such eminent speakers here. I would quickly ask Renu, just in a few seconds or a minute, share some key insights, especially for NCERT, which have emerged from the capacity building of our education functionaries as we went around with the 5 states exercise. I thought it would be useful for you to just very quickly, 30 seconds, Renu, share that with us, please.
So we started, working, because I think the point was exactly this. See, we had a tool. There was no point in just developing a tool and then expecting it to be rolled out. Let's build capacities and master trainers in each of the states so that they could then in turn build capacities of teachers and education officials to be able to pilot it and collect data from the state, which would then be finally analyzed together. And it was supposed to be a collaborative effort. We were able to do face-to-face trainings. I mean, we did 150 master trainers have been trained during this process across the states. What we have faced a further challenge, because even though we did the face-to-face trainings in UP and Jharkhand early last year, the rest of the trainings had to stop because of COVID. So we then used UniLearn, and we had to change track. And I think some of the big learnings, because I think going forward also, when it comes to capacity building, I think NCERT and others would have to definitely use virtual platforms going forward. Some of the learnings were, for example, we had built actually going into schools, administering the tools with children in UP and Jharkhand when we conducted the workshops. They were a 2.5, 3-day workshops. They came back, then they entered the data. We handheld them in being able to, use the formats to then analyze and look at how do you think these children are faring? What can you do to support them? Because it was all meant to be looked at from a developmental perspective. We found that extremely challenging using online UniLearn, because we found that it was very there were no children that they could access. Teachers had very little internet facilities. They did not know how to use Excel. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we've learned is that the state capacities, because even the 2 states that collected the data, when it came to data entry and double data entry, quality assurance was not there, and we had to redo the whole process here. So I think one of the big learnings has been we have to build these basic capacities in the states. It's not, so of course teachers all felt that they needed much more, I think training and capacity building to be able to come up with their own activities. They all understand that integrating life skills into their lesson plans is the only way forward. But I think we need to definitely also going forward develop formative assessment tools for teachers. But just so that while they know that, they also need to also be able to look at what is it, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right track? And I perfectly agree with Professor Srivastava that pre-service training, this component must find a place now. We can't be only doing this through in-service training. So I'm going to stop because I know we don't have too much time.
Thank you, Renu. Yes, I mean, we have eaten up on our question answer session, but that's fine because many of the questions which have come in are being also addressed as you people speak. But I'll quickly pull up 2 quick ones so that we get your insights into it and move on to our next concluding section. One is to you, Professor Andy. This is about very quick. Is there any longitudinal study done in the direction to explain impact of life skills on academic achievement? Would you know of any tools, any study that has been looking at the linkages? And that's a question we all ask. Is that still really impacting learning? Is there any research evidence? Would you have any information on that? You or Esther? You're on mute, sir. Professor Andy, you're on mute.
Skill, there we go. 21st century skill failing again. I don't know this literature well, so I think I would be speaking out of turn, to be honest. I tend to work at the other end of life. But I think the question really is, what aspect of life skill are we talking about? This whole package that you've listed, can one segment these things in terms of their domains, as we were discussing earlier, and say which of those actually makes a difference? I think our colleague, is it Alexandra, was speaking about her company and what she looks for. Yeah, Alexandra.
Yes, Alexandra.
And she gave us an answer in a sense as to what fits with her outfit. But so the answer is, I mean, in Young Lives, certainly there's been a lot of focus on 21st century skills in the Vietnam piece of the study, and that has been shown to link to opportunity. But I want to throw one question back, if I may, and that is, I keep wondering, how applicable is all this stuff to the millions of Indian children living in rural areas? How much sense does it make to them? How aligned are your curricula to their everyday worlds? to what their parents tell them, what their parents do. I do think that in my experience in my country is that our curriculum developments and things are often coming out of a world that is so different to the everyday life of so many of our kids and our parents. And how can we build that bridge in what we develop so that the curriculum and the activities make what I call local sense as much as they do global sense. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Beautifully wrapped up, beautifully concluded, because it's not a matter of only life skills, but the relevance for any kind of education and program that we are talking about in the context that we have to deliver. So thank you, Professor Andy. I'm going to be just concluding this just very quickly. I'm tempted, Esther, to bring you in for a question in terms of how do special contexts like emergencies change the considerations around life skills measurement? So this was, I thought, an interesting question which came in. Is it possible to include such variety of context in measurement tools, for example? And I leave it at that.
Thank you. I think this is a very difficult issue. Actually, there is a network of organisations that are working on precisely this issue under the INEE network, and they are looking at the establishment both of common frameworks of constructs and also looking at tools within that. So that's a particular group to have a look at, and they're interested in development in crisis and conflict fragile state. So that is something that can be followed up. I just want to very briefly, if I can, talk about that issue of whether life skills actually does increase learning outcomes or life outcomes. And the literature says, like, if you look at the social emotional skills, we do know that if you have children who are well-adjusted, stable, have good environments, typically they do better. This is, and it also just is a sort of very logical, very rational perspective. When we look at the literature about transferability and therefore impact on academic outcomes of teaching the cognitive skills, the literature is quite complicated. And that might go to the way a lot of the studies have been designed. But realistically, we're working a little bit blind here. I think everybody is following what sounds very logical and sensible, but in terms of having any large-scale evidence of that, that does not yet exist. So if anyone out there is looking for a really good research question, this is definitely one.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. I think you have very rightly concluded kind of the session. I would just say that we thought when we were developing the concept note for the webinar, we thought it would be important for us to understand that how, one, when you're talking about integration of life skills into education systems and curricular assessment, we thought it's important to talk about assessment because what is tested is not, what is not tested is not taught. That's something people were deliberating. That should we focus, not focus, how do we focus? But this brings in nuances of be very careful. How are you going to be using assessment? Why you would be using what, and in what context? So that's a relevance. But yes, important is that there are existing challenges regarding measurement. Recent innovation, development says, but that it is possible. It is possible to look at that measurement piece. There are challenges, but we know there are things to keep in mind and move forward, but it is the need of the hour. So despite all challenges, we must prepare to work on this, more prepared, work on more efficacious and reliable tools at all. So I would end up by saying that investment in life skills as well as their measurement is essential. And this isn't a quick fix. It has to be systematic and scientific process, which requires time to test on ground across different contexts. So thank you, everybody. I think we have over 100 people at this point of time watching live, and all of you with us. With this, we are concluding the panel discussion, but I'm introducing my Dwarka, who would formally conclude and with the closing remarks and also give you why we are all here in terms of how this is going to impact us as UNICEF and UVA. Just to introduce very quickly, Dwarka is a kind of a go-getter woman for us someone who has a very strong but extremely passionate and sensitive heart. She's extremely inspiring because, as we fondly call her, Dee, has a successful journey which has involved leapfrogging several roles and experiences to build on a solid program, YUVA, for India Country Office. She's an international development expert, and now she's Chief of Adolescent Development Generation Unlimited here, leading and coordinating one of the largest adolescent and youth development participation initiative of UNICEF. So welcome, Dwarka, and thank you for being with us to come up with the closing remarks here. Over to you.
Thanks, Suman, for the kind words. It gives me a great pleasure to be concluding this webinar, where we bring in our collective experiences and thoughts on reimagining critical needs of the hour, education, life skills, and 21st century skills, to equip young people with skills to effectively tackle challenges. It's an opportunity to learn from each other. This, in fact, is the favorite part of my job at UNICEF, to collectively solve critical challenges faced by young people who have shared their hopes and dreams, but they have also shared their fears and challenges, especially now during the COVID crisis. Will they get the education they need? Are they learning the right skills? Can they find a job? What are the opportunities out there? How can I find them? Today, there are 300 million young people aged 10 to 24 years in India. Meeting their needs will be a big challenge, but it's also a big opportunity. Journey was launched as YUVA in India, a name that was chosen by young people themselves. YUVA is an ambitious multi-stakeholder partnership alliance with long-term goals to engage 300 million young people as change leaders, to equip 200 million young people with 21st century skills for productive life and future of work. And YUVA's strength lies in bringing together the ecosystem and scaling up initiatives that have been functioning in silos, thus increasing the reach and impact. It's an opportunity to come together and help each other build a better and sustainable future with and for young people. To make sure continued learning reaches young people, we scaled up skills training, entrepreneurship, and psychosocial support sessions to reach more than 18 million young people in 2020. We also created new interventions, such as the digital learning platform called UniLearn, which has more than 200 courses on 21st century and life skills. Another intervention that we have been working on is called Fundo, which is a chat-based program to deliver 21st century skills at scale in a practical and interactive way. To provide young people with life and employability skills, we will create scalable and sustainable models to impart 21st century skills and life skills through accessible, innovative technology platforms. 21st century skills, including life skills, are often neglected in early years of life and hence are not nurtured as a part of the education and learning system. The limited awareness and insufficient prioritization in the education and learning system has led to low levels of funding and resources allocated, inadequate supply of life skills programs and tools, and lack of measurement, thus making it difficult to link with progress of children and young people. Collectively, these challenges create a circle that impedes the development of an ecosystem which fosters life skills. A responsive model of learning which is required that integrates development of knowledge and life skills among children and young people is required. A process of lifelong learning must be initiated for them to flourish in the current fast-paced, digitally driven, and dynamic economy. We must foster partnerships with technical experts to build capacities of facilitators, teachers, educators, resource persons, but more importantly, the young people themselves on the prepared content across different states, and establish a robust monitoring and evaluation systems to gather data and assess skills development among different stakeholders. Since partnerships lie at the core of YUVA, key strategic partnerships have been forged to ensure improved and continued civic engagement, career guidance, 21st century skills delivery, and job connect for young people. These partnerships include Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, the governments of Delhi and Punjab, Pricewaterhouse, among many others. Through these partnerships, YUVA has reached more than 20 million young people, both in and out of school, with digital learning and engagement initiatives and opportunities. Some of our partners, like Michael and Suzandel Foundation and SIF, have collaborated to run a 3-year initiative to create a localized and test measurement models for life skills. From this journey, We have learned that we need to be dynamic and innovative to face new challenges and old problems, especially when it comes to solutions with and for young people during the post-pandemic. We can't do this alone. We need to share the best practices and failures as learnings, find opportunities for collaborations, as well as hear from solution providers and young people. We need ideas that are big and small, local and global. This, in the end, is our responsibility. It's our duty to leave a legacy of hope and opportunity for young people, but also together with them. This has been a fascinating discussion, and I would like to thank all the panelists and speakers with us today. As Yasmin said, this is the first step towards supporting this collaborative exercise by bringing together the key stakeholders from government, education functionaries, researchers, academia, and civil society organizations, private sector, to recognize the importance of life skills measurement as an indicator of learning for children and young people, and ensure such tools are accessible to all. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Suman, for your moderation as well.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day or a good night, wherever you are from. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.